You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. My name is Nathan Whittacre. I'm the CEO of Stimulus Technology, and it is my pleasure today to welcome John Asher as a guest. So welcome, John.
Great to be with you.
So I'll read a quick bio on you. So I met John a couple of months ago at a CEO peer group that I belong to here in Las Vegas. He was a speaker that came in, and I was really impressed with his content. So I reached out to him to invite him onto the podcast. And John is an author of 4 sales books, and one of them is a bestseller. He's a former member of Vistage CEO Group in Washington, D.C., and he was 3 times vice president in Vistage Key Groups. He's been a speaker of Vistage for many years, giving over 2,000 presentations in 11 countries, which is quite extraordinary. That's a lot of presentations, John. He does a lot of sales coaching, and he's a continuous learner. And another thing that I hope we get into this just briefly is an age reversal scientist. So that was another topic that I was just really impressed with when we met. So please welcome John to the podcast. I'm excited to have you and talk about technology and sales and speaking and all things. So you've been a speaker for over 28 years. How did you become a Vistage speaker, and why did you decide to do it?
Well, after I left the Navy, my last 5 years in the Navy, I was a buyer in the Pentagon. And so I started a company with 2 other naval officers who were smart. They had PhDs. So they could do real work and couldn't sell. I couldn't do real work, but I could sell. So we teamed up together. And we grew it up pretty quickly to about, 10 million in sales installed. And I joined a peer group. And 9 years later, we're 165 million. And kind of suddenly sold the company. So people would ask us, how are you guys doing this? We just say, hey, it's a peer group. That's essentially the answer to our growth. And so I decided to give back and become a chair for a peer group, Vistage, at the time. And so I applied. And the guy choosing chairs had been in my group with me for 4 years, so we're friends. So I figured this is a slam dunk. And after about an hour, he said, John, I don't think you should be a chair. I said, well, why not? He said, because your main mode in life is to tell everybody else what to do. And that's not the right model to be a good chair. You got to be a great listener, have a lot of empathy, keep asking the CEOs questions until they figure it out themselves. So he said, I don't think you'd be a good chair. However, based on the way you guys grew your company, why don't you be a speaker on sales? That's how I became a speaker on sales, Nathan. I failed selection as chair.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday that the speaker of the podcast was just talking about that. Sometimes our weaknesses are our biggest strengths. So it sounds like you turned a weakness into a strength and led to over 2,000 talks over the few years.
Oh, he was exactly right.
So what about writing books? You've had 4 books. What led you to write the books, and how does that tie into your speaking?
Well, we've had these top 10 selling skills going on now for 20 plus years. They're the foundational skills. Of course, they're continuously improved. And there's a sales training manual, of course, that we use when we do sales training. And at some point, I heard a Vistage speaker who said, if you're going to do marketing, you really need to have a book so that you become more well known. You don't really try to have a book to make a lot of money. I mean, if you do, great, but it's really a marketing thing. So I just hired somebody to turn the sales training manual into a book. It just wasn't that difficult. I mean, it did take 6 months of review and on and on and on, editing and getting references, and that all those things you need to do to write a book. But that's essentially why I did it. And then that turned out to be a bestseller. So once I got into the neuroscience of sales, I wrote another one about the neuroscience, and then the new reality with AI tools, another one. And then we've had a team in China for many years. And so my general manager over there and I wrote a book together. I kind of said what should be in it, and he wrote it in Mandarin. It actually became a bestseller in China as well.
Oh, wow. That's
The
really
title
impressive.
was How to Sell to the West. So it's advising Chinese salespeople how to sell to buyers in the U.S.
Interesting. Yeah, it's certainly, writing a book gives you or requires you to really refine your ideas and processes. And I really enjoyed that when wrote my book, and just really what you believe in, you have to get it down on paper and be very clear about it. So it sounds like you kind of went through the same process. So you mentioned the top 10 skills for salespeople. Can you run through those with us? What are those? And then I want to get into AI after that. But what are the top 10 or the top skills for salespeople that they need to have today?
Well, when you look at the top 10 skills, they're not only the 10 skills you need, but they're in the order that they're used. So they form at least the start of the sales process. So skill one goes back to the first peer group speaker I ever heard. His talk was money flows where focus goes. And then he explained over 3 hours how it applies to all aspects of business, especially sales. And so great salespeople pick a few top prospects and give them a lot of touches, whereas average salespeople pick a lot of prospects and give them a few touches. So that's skill one, focus on a few top top prospects. Skill two is from the challenger sale. Be ready to challenge the buyer with an ROI that shows why they should shift from their company to from them to you. Skill three is all about having that inside coach from the Miller Hyman training. So that in the Cubby training, it's called the inside champion. In China, you call it the guanxi, that inside relationship. Skill four is now that you're ready to go out and meet the buyer, build rapport, make the buyer comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Second, do a discovery process. And we have a skill called perfect listening. Not good, not great, not outstanding, but absolutely perfect listening, which almost always will result in a sale. Skill six is if you need to differentiate your company, be ready with a unique selling proposition. Seven is understand there's going to be objections, know what the top four are, and know how to handle them. Skill eight is know how to close the deal. Skill nine is once you close the deal, either that salesperson becomes the account manager or somebody else does. And their job is, of course, to execute brilliantly, do a great job, build a lifetime relationship with the buyer. And once you've done that, you can upsell, cross-sell, get referrals. Skill 10 is referrals. Get the referral and repeat the process. So those are the fundamentals all salespeople need.
So if you were to look at sales today, especially, we're doing a lot of sales that are virtual. You're meeting potentially over Zoom or Teams or something like that. Has the sales process changed at all over the last, 5 years or so, especially with COVID?
It's actually really not changed quite so much. It's just today, salespeople need the fundamentals, they need the neuroscience skills, and they also need the new reality skill, one of the ones you're talking about. Here's an example. When you survey buyers and ask, when salespeople that you meet on, say, Zoom or some other VC platform, do they exhibit good skills on those platforms? Only a third of the buyers say yes. And so in today's world, let's say it's a Zoom call. If a salesperson can't get the Zoom call organized, doesn't get the time zone right, when it's time doesn't show up on time, can't pull up a document like a proposal, doesn't know how to modify the document in real time if necessary, doesn't have guidance from the company on how much they can modify the document. For 2/3 of the buyers, that salesperson is just out. They're just out. That's an example of kind of one of the skills that's come out of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that we learned to do in our interview process recently as we've been hiring salespeople is we require them to give us a sales presentation as our second interview. And it's amazing how many salespeople we don't talk to a third time because they can't do that, effectively. They share the presentation on the wrong screen or in the wrong mode, or they can't even figure out how to put a presentation together. So it's amazing how important those skills are, but lacking in people that say they're salespeople today.
2/3 of the buyers say salespeople can't do it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Pretty amazing.
What about AI? I mean, what kind of tools are you seeing out there today that are helping salespeople, move the client relationship forward?
Well, and when you watch the tools today that are almost at every big company, like Copilot and Microsoft, in every product from Microsoft, whether it's Word or Excel or any of the products, there's now a AI Copilot, and they can help the salesperson be more efficient. And another obvious tool is ChatGPT, especially the higher level, the 4.0 and the $25 a month. And that can help salespeople be a lot more efficient in writing emails, for example, and responding to emails. There's another tool for account managers, and that would be, if you look back in the history of our country for the past 20 years or so, then and you look at, just take your customers, Nathan. If you look at what you're going to get from revenue from this year, 75% will typically come from your customers that you've had. You're going to keep executing those contracts with them. 15% will come from up and cross-selling to them, and 10% from the acquisition of new customers. So most companies put a lot of effort into operational brilliance because you can't afford to lose customers. Keep that 75%. Right. Many companies put a lot of effort into getting new logos, that 10%. And most companies have no formal process for up and cross-selling and don't get anywhere near of it that they could. So now there's an AI tool. So you're the salesperson, you have a headset on, you're listening to the customer in one ear, and you're listening to the AI tool in your other ear. And that AI tool, based on huge databases that is from the large language models that it's got, all social media activities, etc., and also the ongoing conversation, will in real time suggest up and cross-selling opportunities to the salesperson. It's like, how cool is that?
That is amazing. So what's the name of that tool? Or
There's a couple of them, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but it's easy enough if you Google them or just go ask ChatGPT.
Of course, yeah, that's a new term, right? Ask ChatGPT for the referral. And I think you mentioned another one that I thought was interesting from a prospecting standpoint and ties into the neuroscience of sales, which is Crystal Knows. I think that was another one that you mentioned in the presentation.
Yeah, actually, Crystal Knows has been around for 13 years. Now, it's got AI augmentation now. And it's one of the 5 tools of the elite salespeople. And so you go to Crystal Knows, it's a web app, and you put in the buyer's name, you put in the buyer's company, so Crystal knows exactly who you're talking about. Then using AI and machine learning techniques, it goes out and just does word association, goes out to every social media platform, every social networking platform, 400 billion web pages, just doing word association, and comes back in less than a second and tells you which of the 4 personality styles the buyer is. Think disc, driver, C, thinker, supporter, intuitive. And so when a salesperson knows the personality of the buyer before they link out, huge, huge advantage. I mean, a simple example. If most companies have objection scripts, and most companies have about 4 objections that the salespeople routinely get, so there are scripts written up. So the salespeople know how to handle it. Well, if you're handling objection from a driver, would it be the same that you would say if you're handling an objection from a thinker?
Yeah, certainly not. Being a big D myself, driver, it's interesting. The salespeople that don't get my personality drive me nuts. I don't.
Exactly.
If you want to rattle off information and give me all the details initially, I'll be lost. I just want to get to the. Yeah.
That's another example would be I'm an intuitive, and so if I'm selling to you, maybe I'll chat you up a little bit, but not a lot. And as soon as I sense you're done with the chat, I'll stop. Now, if you're selling to me, you better chat me up. because I thrive on the chat. I want to know about you, right? I want to know who I'm going to do business with. So just an example of the usefulness of Crystal Knows.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been taught that over the years many times in the sales process of like how to detect that, through conversation. And sometimes it becomes overwhelming. You're going through your list of all the things you're supposed to do in a conversation with a prospect or even a current customer. And, I think it's amazing now that we have the AI tools that can detect the language from, communication that you have verbally or email or just on their LinkedIn profile. I mean, that's a huge tool to just be able to give you an idea of what you need to know about the prospect of how to communicate effectively with them.
Totally 100% agree.
Yeah. So anything else? I mean, you mentioned, 5 key tools that salespeople need to use. So I think that was one of them. What other tools do salespeople need to use?
So if you go back to that first speaker I ever heard, money flows where focus goes. So average salespeople maybe have 15 tools that they'll use, and they're probably okay at using them. The elite salespeople will get down just to the basics that you really, really need, and they become experts on them. So just another example of the money flows where focus goes. So one of them is CRM for obvious reasons. This makes it much more efficient. Number 2 is Crystal Knows, the ability to find out the personality style of the buyer before you interact. The third is the Sales Navigator app within LinkedIn. And now, tremendous, it's always been great tools in Sales Navigator. Now, tremendous tools. As an example, if you now go, in Miller Hyman training, it's all about who's the user buyer, who's the technical buyer, who's the economic buyer, and who's your inside coach. Well, many salespeople can find the user buyer and have a conversation, but they can't figure out who the technical buyer is, or even if there is one, or the economic buyer. In many cases, they can't get to them. They're blocked by the user buyer. Now with a tool in Sales Navigator, you can find that out about this fast. So just an example of the many tools in Navigator.
Okay.
The fourth tools are the new AI tools. And then the fifth tool is our aptitude assessment called the APQ, which determines natural talent of all of us for any customer-facing position. And it helps salespeople develop all 4 levels of emotional intelligence. So EQ 1.0 is just seeing what your 9 personality traits are. EQ 2.0 is seeing which of those traits are you really high or really low. Can be a great strength for us, but it can also be a blind spot. Example, my intensity drive is high as you can get. It really does explain in many ways why I've been successful in life. I'm totally driven to make things happen. That's a great strength. Now here's the blind spot. If I require everybody reporting to me in both companies to be as driven as I am, I can burn them out, stress them out, and drive them off. And in a previous company, I've done exactly that. That's EQ 2.0. 3.0 is very specific. It's you and the job you're in. Where are there any red flags from the personality traits? And learning to stretch from them, you'll do better in the role. And then 4.0 is understanding which of the 4 personality styles you are, understanding that 75% of the rest of the people in the world are different than you, and the one diagonal from you is way different from you. And being able to get along with them at the expert level is the highest level of EQ. It sounds easy, but it is actually difficult to execute. So, for example, the opposite of me is a thinker, right? I'm an intuitive. So I'm big picture, people-oriented. The thinker is task-oriented, detail-oriented. So we couldn't be more different. Now, in our company, there's 7 partners. When we get leads of bigger opportunities, they go to each one in turn, unless it's a mismatch. So if it's a thinker buyer and it's my turn, we're going to skip me and give it to one of the partners who's a thinker. It's not like I can't do it. I mean, I teach it so I can do it, but it's a struggle and it's easy to screw up. So why not give it to somebody who's the same personality style?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense is, knowing where you're at. It just and knowing where the prospect is, it just makes your job a lot easier if you can find a match for it rather than overstretching yourself. So I like that a lot.
Especially when you know it in advance. It's
Yeah.
almost like cheating, right?
For sure. As we kind of wind down here, I was really impressed with your discussion on age reversal. My story about 12 years ago, I realized I was heading down a kind of a dark road of health and really changed my life. I lost 80 pounds and became an endurance athlete through that, and really changed my diet and my habits and things like that. And so, I mean, that happened in my 30s. You really, in the presentation, talked about this is a lifelong journey to increase our age dramatically that we can live to. And maybe I know we don't have a lot of time. Your presentation was several hours you could have given, but can you give us just a brief overview of what that looks like? What things are we finding today that is really changing our ability to live a longer life?
The fundamentals are get great sleep, number one. Get 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night. And Brian Johnson, the guy who sold the fintech to eBay for $880 million and then decided to live forever, started a company called Don't Die. I introduced him recently at a longevity convention. And I'm doing everything he's doing, just not to the degree. He's measuring vitamin D level at a tenth of a microliter, per nanogram. I mean, I don't need to do that to have the right vitamin D. I'm essentially doing everything he's doing. So then there was a Q&A. And it was a bunch of functional medicine doctors. And one of the women said to Brian, if you had to give up everything you're doing except one thing, what would it be? He immediately said sleep. He didn't hesitate. He said 8 hours of sleep. And then later, another woman asked, functional medicine doctor, so Brian, if you had to give up everything except two things, what would be number two? What do you think, Nathan?
I mean, I'd have to go with either diet or exercise, or both.
He said move.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you do regular cardio and regular strength training, you reduce your all-cause mortality by 40%. It is the second best thing you can do to decrease your all-cause mortality. And then the third thing, of course, is, as you suggest, nutrition. And what it basically means is get off of ultra-processed foods. People that only eat ultra-processed foods as 20% of their diet shorten their lives actually dramatically. So
it's really sad. It's really sad what we have here in the U.S. is it's hard to not eat an ultra-processed diet of at least 20%. You just go to the grocery store and 90% of the shelves are stocked with processed foods.
Yeah, not just processed, ultra-processed.
Mm-hmm.
So really, really bad. Now, the fourth fundamental people don't think about is get a blood test every year and get your microbiome tested. Because we've learned, 5 years ago, nobody heard the term microbiome. Now everybody's kind of heard of it. And so our microbiome is our gut, and it's full of good and bad bacteria. The good bacteria are called probiotics, and prebiotics are what the good bacteria like to eat and what we should be eating a lot of. And so 7 years ago, I had my microbiome tested. It was full of dysbiotic, bad bacteria. And over 3 or 4 years, I got rid of all that, and now I have a perfect microbiome. So the idea here is get your microbiome and your blood tested initially, and then see what you need to do to get it into the optimum range. That's really the fourth fundamental that most people don't think about.
Interesting.
Example, both my parents died of something stupid. If they'd have gotten the right cancer screening, the right testing, they'd have never died of what they died of.
It's unfortunate. Our insurance system here in the U.S. and medical care system in general is all focused on reactive medicine. Just take care of things when they happen, and not enough focused on our proactive wellness as a society. And just puts the responsibility on us. There's just not. I don't know. Maybe it's not taught correctly or not enforced enough. But just this thought, like, oh, if I do get sick, the doctors and healthcare system will take care of me. And it's just not, I guess it's not, in my opinion, it's really not about living long, but it's about living long well. And that's what you're talking about, is how to live a long life, but also live a long life well. So, I mean, share with us, you mentioned in the talk how old you are, which was really impressive to me.
Well, your listeners can go to sharecare.com. It's a website, been around for a long time.
Okay.
You go there, have your blood test ready, and because they'll ask you questions like what's your LDL, what's your A1C, or what's your weight, etc. And it'll come back and tell you what your biological age is. And you know your real age, right? So I've done it for 10 straight years. And also, after your test results come back, it'll show you what you can do to decrease your biological age even further. So the last 4 years, there's no suggestions for me. In other words, I'm essentially doing everything you could do to live forever. So my biological age is 59. My real age is 83. And I can hit my driver just as far as I could hit it 65 years ago when I was 18. Not always straight, but just as far. And I'm still playing half-court basketball with my kids and grandkids.
That's incredible.
I feel like I'm 35.
I mean, that's all of our goals, is we want to live a long and healthy and productive life, and be able to, live and enjoy the fruits of our labors well into retirement. And you're not just enjoying the fruits of your labors, you're still doing it. You're still out speaking and sharing this information, which is great.
My dad used to say, if you love your work, it ain't work.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. And
so the name of that...
I'll just give you one more piece of interesting data.
Sure.
It is modeled today that if you're under 50 and you do everything right, you can live to 150. None of the gurus in the industry disagree with that. It's also modeled if you're born today, you'll be able to live forever. Because there's a tidal wave of new things coming. So all the founders of this longevity company, none of us have any intention of ever dying, period.
Well, that's an amazing prediction. So, very different than what our government's telling us, about where the health of the U.S. is, or the world is going. So, but it really takes a lot of effort on each one of our parts to do it. It's not something
just this last weekend at my 65th high school reunion. And it was a prep school, so I had an athletic scholarship, but most of the kids were very smart and had wealthy parents and that sort of thing. And I didn't. So I got almost a full athletic scholarship. And 60% of my classmates are dead.
Wow.
That should never happen. And as you know, most of it driven by the obesity epidemic.
It is. It's, I mean, I think living proof of that, where I was heading and the changes you can make. And they're simple changes. I mean, like you just said, move, eating, changing your diet. I'm not saying fad diet. It's just, the eating fresh fruits and vegetables and lean proteins. And, my wife and I cook at home. We eat a lot of vegetables and a lot of lean meats. And it's amazing how much better you feel every day, how much more energy it is. And then, of course, the endurance athletic adventures that we have.
When you look at the Mediterranean diet, you see a lot of this stuff, some of this, a little of this, and hardly any of this. When you look at the Western diet, it's exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it couldn't be any worse. And
Yeah,
the trouble with the Mediterranean diet is it's not what we eat at all. We eat a lot of fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, extra virgin olive oil, and whole wheat. And most people don't, almost nobody eats nuts and seeds, really. Very few people. And most people eat bread instead of whole grain bread. On and on and on and on.
Yeah, I would love to have this conversation with you for a long time, because it's you're preaching to the choir on it, and with me, I lived it. It's amazing what the change can do and how much healthier you can be. So, but thank you, John.
And frankly, Nathan, you look great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not 83, but I hope to look as good as you do at your age and maintain my current age for a long time. So
Good for you.
yeah. Well, thank you, John, for sharing your insights. I think we learned a lot today about cells and also about the technology that's coming out in medicine, and it's basic stuff. It's stuff that we all should be doing, but it's just refining it and getting it down to some really key things that we need to be doing in our lives, which is anti what society preaches often. So thank you, John, for your time. Appreciate it, and thank you for your time, and thanks everybody for being here.
Great to be with you all.
All right. And actually, before we go, just I should have done this earlier. How can people find you or learn more about your sales training and things that you're doing?
Oh gosh, just look for me on LinkedIn.
All right, John Asher on LinkedIn. So, all right, thanks again, John. We'll put the links down below, and have a great day, everybody.
You too.